Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
We will continue to see high rates of influenza and RSV for the next few weeks.
Another plea for more of you to get vaccinated in BC as respiratory cases remain high and strain an already exhausted healthcare system. Plus,
it feels like my spirit's been robbed.
It has given us anxiety and fear.
small business owners in Maple Ridge ask for more protection after a string of punishing robberies. And
well, it seems to keep coming. And I mean, I still see the hazardous materials guys over there, so there must be something going on.
people in a Delta farming community are worried a recent oil spill has contaminated nearby waterways and properties.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. BC's top doctor is again asking more of you to get vaccinated. Officials say influenza A and RSV are both circulating at high levels and rising in our province. As Janella Hamilton reports, the push comes after 3 children died from flu-related causes.
Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry is warning it's peak respiratory virus season.
We will continue to see high rates of influenza and RSV for the next few weeks. The provincial wastewater data shows us that influenza A levels continue to increase overall across the province.
Henry says in the past week, about 10,000 people were in hospital, many with respiratory illnesses, particularly young people.
While we're not seeing as much respiratory illnesses as people are seeing in other parts of Canada and the world, where immunization rates are lower, it is a reminder of the importance of vaccinations and the healthy habits overall in limiting the impact.
It's not as much of a tsunami as it was last year. Last year was crazy. Now, it still is bad, but we're also dealing with the ramifications of a healthcare system that's shaking.
Last week, the BC Centre for Disease Control reported a 3rd child under the age of 10 had died from flu-related causes. Henry says none of the children had been vaccinated against influenza and all developed a secondary bacterial infection.
It is so sad and tragic when we know that young people can be protected from these infections.
When it comes to vaccinating people, we have the biggest number in the entire country. That's still not a lot, and that's not enough. And it's even less in kids.
As of Tuesday, more than 1.5 million doses of flu vaccine have been administered, a lower vaccination rate than this time last year.
People talk about how, I got vaccinated, but I still got sick. So what's the point? We need to erase that. The risk of severe illnesses, the risk of hospitalization, the risk of death, that goes down with the vaccination.
Health Minister Adrian Dix says while hospitals are facing immense pressure, he maintains there is capacity to deal with an unexpected surge of sick people in the coming weeks. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Vancouver.
Brace yourself, extreme cold weather is on the way for much of British Columbia, but it comes after an unusually dry and warm fall, and so far, very little snow. As Lindsay Duncombe reports, the lack of snowpack could be a warning sign of serious drought in the future.
Don't let those snow-capped mountains peeking through the clouds deceive you. Canada's normally wet west coast is dangerously dry.
This is the lowest that I've ever seen.
All that red in the snowpack report alarming. As of January 1st, overall snow in British Columbia was just 56% of normal levels.
What is unusual is just to see so much of the province below normal.
Snowpack is important because when it melts, snow fills reservoirs for drinking water and provides protection against wildfires. The situation is especially dire in the village of McBride. Their reservoir so low, it's making contingency plans to truck in drinking water, even drill for new wells.
Everybody's worried, but you got what you got.
Overnight, though, this. In 2 days, the community went from no snow to 45 centimeters. Still not enough to solve the problem, but short-term relief.
I can't tell you how huge it is to know that we got some measurable snowfall at our intake. That just makes a difference in the world to us at this point.
Reservoirs that feed Vancouver just got a big dump of snow too.
The weather conditions are so variable right now, things are changing, and we just need to be prepared, which is why we're trying to get people to conserve as much water early in the season.
In order to reach normal levels of snowpack by spring, snowfall in BC would need to be abnormally high. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
Let's go to Darius Madavi now, who joins us for a first look at the weather. And Darius, you've been talking about this for months, from spring to summer to fall, now to winter. It's like a winter drought.
Yes, and I mean, really, we've been watching this since the fall of 2022, when we first saw the drought situation take off. Then, right through the winter of 2022-2023, things were looking all right. The snow basins were doing well, and then we just saw the most incredibly rapid snow melt in sort of April and May of last year, which then put us right back in the drought situation we had left behind in the fall, or at least thought we had left behind. Now, what we have is sort of a flip of that situation, hopefully at least, because we're heading into this with, again, it's a very severe drought situation. But whereas last year we got picked right up with that snowfall, I think it was around 80% of normal. This time we're going into it with around the January 1st update, around 50%, just over half of the usual snow levels we have this time of year. And you can see, especially for the more southern parts of the province, we have an incredibly low amount of snowfall, less than half the typical amount. I think 10 to 15% of stations across the province are facing their lowest snowfall levels ever recorded at this point. Now, in the last week and a half since we had that January 1st update, or since the update is as of January 1st, we have gotten some more snowfall. The River Forecast Center says it's not quite enough to really make much of a difference, but given how bad of a drought situation we were in at this, or just at the end of November in our last update, anything helps. And over the next 3 months, we could see that change. We could get a decent amount of snowfall, which would really help as we head into the next drought season of next year. But for now, it doesn't look like too much snow coming. Despite the cold snap, what we're really going to see is that snow head up into the more northern parts of the province. Good news there. And it's not until early next week that we might start to see that snowfall come further south. Now, I'm going to take a quick look at the watches and warnings, but we will have a more thorough update on this later this hour. But extreme cold warnings across the province, and then some Arctic outflow warnings for the north and central coasts and the North Island and parts of Vancouver Island and Greater Victoria area and the Greater Vancouver area because of those really high winds, that extreme cold warning. But there's a chance of some pretty serious snow for parts of the valley and East Vancouver Island, but it's very uncertain at this point, so we'll have to wait and see what happens tomorrow evening.
Okay, thanks very much, Darius.
Thanks, Dan.
Avalanche Canada, meanwhile, is warning of dangerous conditions across many backcountry areas in southern BC. The agency says several regions are showing persistent weak layers deep in the snow. It says the recent fall has failed to bond with the base layer in some areas, and that poses extra risks. The agency recommends you do not travel in avalanche terrain right now.
Large avalanches are likely. Human-triggered large avalanches are likely in many of our forecast regions. We're just coming out of the storm, so it's definitely a time to be kind of tiptoeing a little bit, staying backed off from larger pieces of terrain and making lots of observations, looking for signs of instability.
Much of BC, as we heard, is about to be hit with a cold snap. Avalanche Canada warns that the extreme cold can also worsen avalanche risks. More than 20 working groups in Vancouver's downtown Eastside are now urging the BC government to focus more on homelessness in its upcoming provincial budget. The groups have 8 requests, including calls to buy and renovate at least 10 SRO hotels, fund more shelter space, and rent the parking lot next to Crab Park to set up a tiny home village. These requests came about after the Carnegie Housing Project interviewed 90 unhoused people and held 3 town halls to hear the community's most urgent needs. Several small businesses in Maple Ridge are ringing alarm bells after a string of break-ins, robberies, and vandalism left shattered glass and big losses. As Saurabh Sandhu reports, business owners are asking for immediate action to boost safety.
It feels like my spirit's been robbed. Sorry.
Taylor Livesey is the owner of Vanilla Bean Bake Shop in downtown Maple Ridge. On Tuesday morning, an intruder broke into her store. Livesey says besides the money in the register, the thief took off with other valuables.
In terms of financial losses, we're into the thousands at this point.
But Livesey is not alone. On Sunday morning, just a few blocks away, another business was targeted. This time, a huge rock thrown through the glass door.
They grabbed what they could. There was stuff all over the floor. There was jewellery taken.
Besides the loss of items, Kaur says her business will also have to deal with a lot of damage and the emotional impact as well.
It has given us anxiety, fear, more like we're scared. I'm looking at everyone who's walking by.
Ridge Meadows RCMP says over the last month they have seen a rise in number of thefts and break-and-enters, especially in the downtown core, leaving several businesses impacted.
When you put your heart and soul into something, and to have somebody just come in here and violate all of that without your permission, without your consent, it's not something that I would wish on anybody.
We're not Walmart or, Amazon. Not that it's okay for them to get hit, but for us it hits differently. It affects us more.
It's a huge impact. It's financial, but it's also an emotional impact. Not only do they have to close the business, potentially for the day or multiple days, but also there's the financial implication of having to pay for damage or pay insurance premiums or restock.
Ridge Meadow RCMP says they are analysing the crime trends and will bump up patrols in the coming days to help protect the community. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Maple Ridge.
A City of Victoria employee has been fired for removing the head of a cougar shot and killed by police. In November, the cougar was spotted west of the downtown core. Victoria police officers killed it, citing a public safety risk. The carcass was taken to the city's public works yard. When conservation officers followed up, they found the carcass was missing its head. Well, the head was recovered. The person who took it received a written warning and was later let go. CBC News asked for more details on the nature of the firing, but neither the city nor the workers' union has responded. People in a Delta farming community fear a recent oil spill has contaminated local waterways and properties. The spill happened in November after a train derailed. And as John Hernandez reports, crews are still working to recover thousands of liters of oil.
Where are they?
Last week, Dave Patterson took his dog Molly for a walk. She jumped into a ditch near his home. When she came out, he says she was covered in what appeared to be oil residue.
And she went in last week and came out just black. I was amazed.
In November, a BNSF train derailed nearby, which the province says spilled an estimated 8,000 liters of fuel. Patterson, who's lived here for 23 years, says he's since noticed thick oil films floating atop these local waterways.
It seems to keep coming, and I still see the hazardous materials guys over there, so there must be something going on.
And he's not the only one. This drone operator has been contracted by a local blueberry farmer to survey and record damage. A culvert beneath the highway connects the spill site to the farm.
One of his ditches feeds directly into his irrigation pump house. A second ditch that also shows a significant amount of oil runs right down the middle of his property.
This week, hazardous material crews were still at the derailment site. Containment booms are still in place, and a tarp continues to cover the spill area. Still, concerns are mounting that heavy rains are causing potential contaminants to spread.
It continues to leak all different colors of substances. Why is it still there? If it was so important to get it out of the rail bed, why is it still sitting here in the bog, what looks to be contaminating further and further every day?
In a statement, BC's Environment Minister says the province takes all spills seriously and is monitoring this incident to ensure that the environment is protected. The cleanup won't be finished until we are satisfied that the area is fully remediated. In the meantime, residents are left wondering what the overall impact on their community could be.
We haven't been told anything, really.
Canada's Transportation Board says the investigation is ongoing. BNSF insists its containment booms are holding contaminants in place and plans to remove soil in the coming weeks. John Hernandez, CBC News, Delta.
Surrey is getting almost $100 million from the federal government to fast-track housing. The funding is expected to accelerate the construction of 2,800 units over the next 3 years, with a promise to build more than 16,000 homes over the next decade.
We know that affordable housing for everyone is a cornerstone of a healthy community. This funding will benefit Surrey residents by creating accessible housing for our ever-growing population.
Ottawa has already given hundreds of millions of dollars to cities through the Housing Accelerator Fund. That money is supposed to help build 100,000 new homes across Canada by September 2026. Governments across BC, meanwhile, are pushing to build more affordable housing. But can that construction actually be done affordably? As Justin McElroy explains, Metro Vancouver is facing an extra $100 million in costs for 2 projects, and they haven't even started building yet.
How much does it cost to build 2 affordable rental projects on government-owned land? A lot more than Metro Vancouver thought 4 years ago.
We're seeing this everywhere, and this is for a nonprofit. It is challenging to make these numbers work.
That is Metro Vancouver Housing Committee Chair Dan Burritt, and this is what he is talking about. 2 projects that Metro Vancouver approved in 2020. The Connection, with 174 units, was supposed to cost $64 million. Now it's $121 million. And the Stellar, with 122 units, was supposed to cost $46 million. Now it's $94 million. Construction hasn't started yet, and Burritt and his committee will vote on approving the increased budget next week. But the question remains, why has the budget for these projects nearly doubled? How does affordable rental housing on public land cost more than $700,000 a unit? Now, it's at this point that I might say here is a chart, but that's not actually possible here because Metro Vancouver, like most governments, doesn't actually give a detailed public breakdown of why budgets for individual projects balloon. Instead, in this case, just mentioning things like increased parking and bike lockers or construction costs. Now, construction costs have risen in recent years by quite a bit, particularly for concrete. And different people will appreciate different aspects of this project, whether it's the parking, more bike lockers, or an enhanced childcare facility. And it does bear mentioning that all these units will be for people that are on low or moderate incomes, and the majority will be 2 or 3 bedrooms. But a development strategist and former BC Housing Vice President says more transparency is helpful, both for retaining the public trust for these projects and for helping them understand who benefits from budgets going up.
We're not saying profit is a bad thing. We're saying we want to understand how it's a factor, just like we want to understand how raw materials are a factor. It allows us the space to not only trust what's happening, but for people to propose and seek ways to innovate.
Incidentally, both of these projects are happening in Burnaby, which is having its own problems with the ballooning cost for pools and community centers and a new RCMP detachment. Enough for council last month to create an outside panel to look at the situation.
We still need to build the projects, but I just want to be able to go to the public and look them straight in the eye and let them know we're getting the best value we can.
It's probably good politics, but whether it uncovers a way to actually reduce these budgets is another question entirely. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
The BC government has released new renderings of the Fraser River Tunnel project, which will eventually replace the 4-lane Massey Tunnel. Take a look. The new 8-lane highway will be built under the Fraser River. As these renderings show, the process starts by digging trenches, lowering the tunnel frames into position, and then adding gravel and boulders to secure them. The province says it is working to hire a contractor to design the new tunnel. They will be selected this spring. The TransLink Mayor's Council is once again making an urgent plea for more funding. It's asking voters across Metro Vancouver to lean on their provincial and federal officials to boost the budget for public transit.
Our region desperately needs more transit service, and we need their government support now to make it happen.
Coquitlam Mayor Brad West says governments need to commit to an increase in funding by April or the system will face delays and cuts. The council is seeking $500 million in capital funding and another $200 million in operating costs. Climate change causes different responses in animals. For some salmon, they grow bigger. Why this happens and what it accomplishes after the break. And hello to everyone watching our commercial-free live stream. Thanks for being here. A new indoor vertical farm is opening in a Calgary industrial park. The company says it will improve local food security with less reliance on imports. Brian Labby tells us what they hope to accomplish.
A tray of micropeas, one of the first crops to be harvested at Goodleaf Farms. The facility covers 100,000 square feet. The company wouldn't let us take pictures, fearing the competition would copy their setup.
We have created an environment where we provide the plants with exactly what they need at exactly the time they need it.
The plan is to produce 1 million kilograms of leafy vegetables a year. Agreements are already in place with major retailers, and the company says these homegrown veggies could reduce our reliance on imports.
We are creating an alternative, a domestic alternative, to deal with Canada's food sovereignty. But our intent is to be an option to replace imports.
Canada imports billions of dollars worth of veggies every year, most of it from the U.S. Experts say these vertical farms are sprouting up at a time when some U.S. producers are struggling.
The challenge down there is that they're facing droughts and reduced water availability for irrigations.
The City of Calgary's food systems planner says there are about a dozen indoor vertical farms in the city. It's part of a strategy to help maintain supply in the face of events like pandemics and shipping delays.
The ultimate goal is just how do we create a more resilient food system? And there are many ways that we can do that. The indoor food producers are one way.
Goodleaf says it has enough room at this location to double production, something that could happen in the next few years. Brian Labby, CBC News, Calgary.
Here in BC, we talk a lot about salmon, whether they're swimming upstream or on your plate. One SFU study took a closer look into how sockeye are being impacted by climate change. It turns out they're growing larger before they head out into the open ocean than a century ago. Our science and climate specialist, Darius Madavi, joins us to explain why this is important. Darius, where did we get 100 years of data, first of all?
That was my first question, too, because we certainly haven't been directly measuring these fish for over a century. And the answer lies in their scales. Now, to set the scene, we're talking about 13 distinct populations of sockeye salmon found here in the Skeena watershed on the north coast. Now, the nursery lakes of these different populations are shown here in red, and the fish usually stay in them for 1 or 2 years, growing to around 7 to 12 centimeters long before heading out into the ocean, where they continue to grow. And all that growth is recorded in their scales, which, as lead researcher Michael Price told me, are a window into the past.
When you look at a fish scale, it's like the core of a tree. It has concentric rings, and it can tell us how old a fish is, but also how much they grew in for each of those years and in different environments.
Now, this sort of data is invaluable because, like most salmon populations, they are directly affected by climate change. And so by studying these scales, not only were Price and his team able to determine how old the salmon were when the scales were collected, they could also analyze how much they grew each year. And they found that juvenile salmon now grow 20% larger on average in their first year than they did 100 years ago.
Darius, why do the researchers think climate change is responsible for this?
Well, first of all, the growth has coincided with an increase in air and water temperature in their watershed, and there's a lot of variability in how salmon have responded, with some populations hardly seeing any change in size over the last 100 years, and some seeing juveniles grow over 35% larger. Now, with those differences determined in part by how cold and deep their lakes are. And there are a few reasons this would make sense. Now, higher temperatures typically means lakes are more productive, meaning more food is available, and it increases the metabolism of the cold-blooded salmon, giving them more energy to obtain that food. But temperatures still likely aren't the only factor. For instance, populations of these salmon have declined steeply over the last century, meaning less competition for the food for the growing salmon. So it's definitely a complex picture.
And so what does this growth do for the salmon?
Well, in some ways, this is actually a good news story because previous studies have shown that larger sockeye survive better when leaving their freshwater home. But keep in mind, the results varied a lot, and salmon are also highly vulnerable to shifts in temperature. And some lakes in the Skeena watershed are already at risk of becoming too warm.
Shallow, warm, really productive lakes of the past 100 years ago don't seem to be doing as well now and are forecast to likely not do well in the future. However, there are these very large, deep, and considered unproductive lakes of the past that appear to be improving under warming temperatures, under climate change. And it's likely these habitats where fish will do better in the future.
So experts say the best thing we can do to help save these populations is to protect and maintain a diversity of habitats for them, which will help the salmon survive no matter their size. Dan?
Darius Madavi, thanks very much.
Thank you.
A firm message from the federal government. American states will not be allowed to pillage Canada's drug supply, where there's mounting pressure to take action. After this.
Called utility baskets, and they you can use these will hold a lot of weight, so a lot of people use these. Sometimes they put straps on them so they can put them on their back, they can carry axes and stuff like that. Then you have fancy baskets like well, that's a fancy basket, and all these baskets are old. Baskets will last well over 100 years if you take care of them. The baskets are made out of black ash trees, and what happens with a black ash tree is if you pound it long enough and hard enough, I'll pass this stick around and you can see the growth rings that way. Look at the end of it, you'll see the growth rings, and when you pound it, the wood will separate at those growth rings. So then you have to work them and break them down into what you have here, which is a nice thin strip. You can see how flimsy it is, kinda. You can work it easily. So then, and you guys are gonna get into this pretty soon, we've got some kits made up for you here. So you're gonna start by putting they're called risers, okay? That's what you're gonna start your basket. It's gonna be go across like that, and then these risers are gonna end up going up, and then in between those, you're gonna put your weavers, and then you end up with a basket like that. So go under so that this comes over and tucks back underneath there. Okay? All right.
A recent decision by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration is raising concerns in Canada. Florida has been given permission to go ahead with a plan to import prescription medications from this country. 8 other states are hoping to do the same, triggering fears of drug shortages here. But as Marina von Stackelberg explains, our health minister says Ottawa has the power to stop those shipments.
Canada's cheaper prescription medication will not be the solution to America's sky-high drug prices. That message from Canada's health minister.
Another country does not have the ability to, cannot be given the ability to pillage our health system to its own benefit.
Last week, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration approved a Florida program to import certain prescription drugs from Canada at a lower cost, potentially hundreds of millions of dollars in pharmaceuticals, used to treat a variety of medical conditions like diabetes, HIV, and mental health. But Ottawa says it plans to use its power to stop that from happening.
We have the regulatory ability to ensure that the drug supply is not affected in a way that would result in shortages.
Canada currently bans the export of certain drugs if it could cause or worsen a shortage here. Canadian drugs on average are less than half the price of those sold in the United States. That's because Ottawa limits how much drug makers can charge. The U.S. doesn't.
This is a proposal to essentially give up sovereignty over the cost of prescription drugs in order to get cheaper drugs because they don't want to do the reforms in the United States.
British Columbia had to pass its own rules to prevent Ozempic, a drug meant for diabetes but increasingly used for weight loss, from being massively exported south. BC says Ottawa cannot sit idly by.
This is effectively a raid on Canada's drug supply.
Florida is not the only state that has applied to purchase cheaper Canadian drugs. But it's unclear if any of these plans will come to fruition, in part because of massive pushback from the pharmaceutical industry. Still, Health Minister Mark Holland says he will make Canada's position extremely clear when he meets with his American counterparts during an upcoming trip to Washington. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
Houthi rebels in Yemen are stepping up attacks in the Red Sea in support of Hamas, targeting vessels they say are linked to Israel. Yesterday, British and U.S. naval forces shot down one of the largest barrages yet of drones and missiles. Both countries are warning of reprisals. But as Chris Brown reports, the Houthis, backed by Iran, say they will not stop until the war in Gaza is over.
This was the British warship HMS Diamond as it fired volleys of missiles that, along with U.S. planes and ships, shot down 21 drones and rockets launched by Iran-backed Houthi forces overnight. We targeted an American ship that was providing support to the Zionist entity, said a Houthi spokesman, referring to Israel. It was the largest and most serious of 26 attacks on vessels in the Red Sea in recent weeks, including the seizure of the MV Galaxy Leader, a container ship owned by a company with ties to Israel.
We cannot have a situation where a major sea route, a major ability to move goods around the world is being cut off by terrorists and thugs.
British defense think tank RUSI claims Iran converted this freighter to a spy ship and is using it to feed the Houthis' intelligence.
The support that they're providing to the Houthis, including for these actions, needs to stop. It's not in their interest to see the conflict escalated.
But this expert says the more warnings the Houthis ignore, the more emboldened they seem to get.
They now see that they have actually more leverage than they expected, with the international community being unable to really do anything about it, that they could use that leverage in other conflicts and become a proxy or surrogate of Iranian interests whenever it suits the Iranians.
Many shipping companies are now going the long way around Africa, driving up costs, although most consumers still haven't seen much impact yet. That could change if oil tankers, which still sail through the Red Sea, also change course, says this analyst.
What concerns me most if the petrol tanker market is also affected, because it means that the energy prices could go up and it would have a direct impact on the consumer prices.
Canadian personnel are part of the international mission to protect shipping in the Red Sea, although notably not any of the Arab or African nations closest to the region. It's likely a snub, say experts, at the United States because they disagree with American policy on Israel. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
As we saw there, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken continued his diplomatic mission today in the Middle East. He met with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in the West Bank about the future of the Gaza Strip after the end of the Israeli-Hamas war. Blinken says 4 key Arab nations and Turkey have agreed to start planning for the future reconstruction and governing of Gaza. Preventing the spread of the war in the region and safeguarding Palestinians have been priorities for the top U.S. diplomat's latest mission. The Palestinian territory has been devastated by Israeli defense bombardments since Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th. 1,200 Israelis were killed and more than 200 taken hostage to Gaza in that surprise assault. Hamas officials say more than 23,000 Palestinians have been killed since the start of the Israeli offensive to eradicate the militants. Tomorrow at the International Court of Justice, South Africa will argue that Israel is committing genocide against Palestinians. As Evan Dyer tells us, the stakes are high for everyone involved.
As Israel continues its military offensive in Gaza, political leaders are preparing to defend its actions in court.
Tomorrow, the State of Israel will appear before the International Court of Justice to dispel South Africa's absurd blood libel.
We know apartheid when we see apartheid.
South Africa is accusing Israel of genocide at the International Court of Justice. Its ruling party has long been at odds with Israel's government and championed the Palestinian cause. It wants the court to intervene now.
The binding obligation of the State of Israel to immediately suspend its military operations in and against Gaza.
Nice to see you.
But Israel's most powerful ally, the U.S., doesn't agree.
The charge of genocide is meritless.
The Canadian government hasn't taken a position. A promised statement wasn't released by end of day. The issue is dividing the Liberal caucus. Montreal MPs Anthony Housefather and Marco Mendicino have called the genocide claims baseless and unconscionable. But Scarborough MP Salma Zahid wants Canada to support South Africa's case. The case against Israel points to statements by Israeli leaders as evidence of intent to kill or displace Palestinians. The Israeli government is taking the allegations seriously.
The fact that Israel is also appearing before the court already shows that it will not ignore the ICJ fully. It has an interest in trying to show the world that it wants to comply with international law.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu appeared to respond to comments by some in his own cabinet calling for Gaza's 2 million Palestinians to be sent to other countries.
Israel has no intention of permanently occupying Gaza or displacing its civilian population. Israel is fighting Hamas terrorists, not the Palestinian population. And we are doing so in full compliance with international law.
Evan Dyer reporting from Ottawa. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, meanwhile, is calling on the federal government to remove a cap on the number of Palestinians who can seek refuge in Canada.
A cap of 1,000 people would really make a lot of people feel like, what's the point of applying if it's only going to be 1,000 people? That'll be finished so quickly.
Ottawa is offering visas to a maximum 1,000 Palestinians with extended family. The visas allow them to take refuge in Canada for 3 years if their families are willing to support them financially. Days of violence have triggered a state of emergency and a state of internal armed conflict in Ecuador. Drug gangs from inside and outside that country are being blamed for violence that began to surge on Monday following a prison break by a notorious gang leader. As journalist Mary Trini Mena reports, several gangs have been designated as terrorist groups and are now targets of the military.
Guayaquil, the largest city in Ecuador, is calm, at least for now. But over the last 48 hours, violent attacks by gang groups have taken place across the city, including at a local TV station where heavily armed men interrupted a live broadcast and kidnapped the staff. So far, 10 people have died and 13 have been detained in the city. The government declared internal armed conflict, which means the country is following severe security measures, reinforcing the borders and airports. The police and military forces have taken to the streets of Ecuador. In-person classes have been suspended nationwide. The streets of the main cities look empty out of fear of criminal gangs. Many commercial establishments have decided to close their doors as a precaution. Ecuador is facing a growing violence, mostly from local prisons. In recent days, one of the most wanted drug lords escaped from jail, unleashing violence. President Daniel Noboa identified 22 transnational groups and designated them as terrorist organizations. Neighboring Peru has reinforced its border in an effort to prevent criminals from crossing into its territory and has also declared an emergency in the area. Ecuador's government says the country will remain under a state of emergency for at least a month. Marita Limena for CBC News, Caracas.
The forecast for Canada, stormy. Areas of Atlantic Canada and parts of Ontario are expecting a serious blast of winter. What they're facing and our deep freeze are next.
We know about the devastation to structures and to the town itself, but what was it like for the people that were there?
Well, of course, you know, the day of the fire was one piece, and you know, the people in the village ran for their lives, but also all of the neighboring communities were evacuated as well. You know, even if they didn't lose their home, they were all evacuated. And then it was the unknown, because, you know, we all spread in various directions and different communities in the province. And it was that unknown of not knowing, you know, what was going on and what had really happened. And it wasn't probably till the next day that we fully realized that our town was gone. So it was, you know, impactful for the people that lost their homes, but also for the people that didn't lose their home, but they lost their town, their community.
And where are things currently at in terms of rebuilding Linton?
Yeah, well, you know, we like to say now we are on the phase of rebuilding. We've finally completed the cleanup and the remediation and all of those other pieces. Yeah, the recovery. You know, we've pretty much finished that part. And so we've actually seen our very first house start to be rebuilt. Just before Christmas, the foundation went in. Yeah, it's pretty exciting to see.
And there were delays that were due to archaeological surveys. What's the status of those now?
You know, pretty much all the lots are finished. I think around 95% or something like that of all the lots are finished. The archaeology, there is a section of town that ancestral remains were found in, and the archaeology branch of the province is working on that process. Yeah, so pretty much we are, you know, we're past that point. Saying that, you know, once people start going in and digging service trenches and basements or anything like that, there'll still be more monitoring happening.
Of course. Is there anything you want people to just sort of know about what Linton is going through right now, about where is Linton at right now?
Yeah, well, you know, when I mentioned losing our community and our town, I think that is, you know, two and a half years later, and you know, it's another level of trauma for people. You know, the day of the fire was one type of trauma, and then just all the unknowns and the slow process. And, you know, here we are today, that there's still, you know, I don't even know how many, 2,000 people living around the community in the outlying areas without that coffee shop to go to or the post office to drop in at and those kinds of things. So it's just so challenging.
We're sharing really important information with the public, and I feel like this is exactly what our job is, especially as the public broadcaster, especially in morning radio. That's incredibly important.
So I know when I really like a song, if within the first 3 seconds, I'm already vibing to it.
Hey, I'm Rohith Joseph. Vibin' is the new show all about discovering great new songs and fresh artists from across BC and beyond.
It's not one person dictating what good music is. It's the community sharing what good music is.
Stream Vibin' on CBC Listen.
With a strong cold snap on the way, shelters across BC are gearing up to help more people on the street stay safe and warm. We went to one shelter space in Kamloops where organizers say no one will be turned away.
Merritt Place is a 50-bed emergency homeless shelter, and we serve folks over the age of 19 that are struggling with complex homelessness. We're always full here. We're always at maximum capacity, so we work hand in hand with our own outreach team, being able to triage folks into other shelters and communities.
We expect over the next couple of days there will be an increase in demand as far as shelter spaces. Our commitment is not to turn anyone away. You know, we would put mats on the floor here. We have flex spaces at our supportive housing sites that we're able to activate. We have the Alliance Church shelter, we have the Yacht Club shelter, we have Out of the Cold shelters. So those spaces would also come in handy at this time.
I am a single mother who fell on some rough times after my divorce and then came into addiction. Got clean and sober from the Merritt Place for 6 months and then I fell back off. So I'm back here. It is very hard to be at this point to get back up, but this place helps you so much and I don't know where I'd be without the Merritt Place.
Well, winter weather has arrived across Canada. Some provinces are dealing with the deep freeze, as we were about to, while others are getting their first major snowfall. Every province and territory in this country, other than Ontario, is under a weather warning tonight. Jennifer Yoon shows us just how bad it's been and what's to come.
Powerful winds reaching 95 kilometers per hour, so strong they overturned this passenger bus in Burritt, Quebec. I was on top of my wife, then 2 more people fell on top of us, says this man. The crash sending 12 people to hospital with minor injuries. The snowfall, part of a system that moved across Ontario into Quebec, leaving a mess, cutting power to thousands.
2 of the nastiest days of the winter. It wasn't just even sort of easing into winter. It was like, wow, here it was all at once.
In Ottawa, people are mopping up. First it was snow, then rain. Now more snow is on the way. For city workers, it's a race against time to try to prevent sidewalks and roads from freezing over.
So we're going through plowing all those now, and the goal is to have them done before we get the freeze up.
Now that same storm is walloping the East Coast. The Confederation Bridge off New Brunswick closed because of wind gusts up to 125 kilometers an hour. And this apartment in St. John evacuated as the wind tore off part of the roof. Schools are closed in PEI and New Brunswick, though some people are making the best out of it.
I love shoveling snow. At 7-8 and still dancing. Come on, it's great to be alive.
While this storm passes, a similar system is forecasted on the same trajectory Saturday. A blast of winter arriving in the west, too. Bitterly cold temperatures are setting in, with wind chills of up to -45 in parts of Alberta and the BC interior. A shocking change after a mild start to the season.
Well, we've been way above average for December and early January, but that's changing. And all you have to do is look out west to see what's coming our way.
Jennifer Yoon reporting tonight. Winter storms are also affecting travel by sea, more specifically, the Salish one. Have a look at this video taken by a Washington State Ferries worker earlier this week. Yikes. Washington State Ferry says the vessel was headed to Anacortes and was not carrying passengers. The damage caused by the flooding decks was minimal, and they say it had no effect on ferry services. Wouldn't want to be aboard anyway, Darius Madavi, would you, when that surge comes in?
Definitely not. And we're going to continue to see some of those big waves overnight tonight and into tomorrow morning, and then it should start to taper off because we have high tide again tonight, and it's especially high because we're in sort of the new moon part of the cycle, which means the sun and moon and earth are all aligned, making those tides even bigger than usual. We also sometimes have some higher tides in the winter, and we have those strong winds. We have a special weather statement for those winds right about here for Metro Vancouver area, saying that we could get some strong winds, small possibility of some localized coastal flooding as well. Now, otherwise, this is going to be a busy board. Arctic outflow warnings for parts of the north or the entire north and central coast, as well as the north of Vancouver Island, and here in the Metro Vancouver area, as well as the Greater Victoria area, and for the Gulf Islands. That's warning of winds up to 60 to 80 kilometers per hour, and bringing with it wind chill values down to -20 down here, and up for the coast closer to -30, -40 possible. Now, we also have these extreme cold warnings, temperatures going down across parts of northern BC, as well as all of Alberta, to -40 degrees Celsius, with the wind chill feeling like -55. And then the last thing I want to mention is the snowfall warning here, still in place for the East Valley, eastern parts of the Fraser Valley. Now, this is very much uncertain. Environment Canada still has that warning up for around 10 centimeters by tomorrow. Most of the models not showing that snow, but some of them showing quite a dump, so keep it in there for good measure. If we take a look at the radar, you can see not much coming down right now in that part of the valley, but still possibility that it does come tomorrow. If we take a look at the model here, you can see that possibility. You can see that possibility here, just overnight tonight and into tomorrow morning, and then it starts to taper off by the late afternoon, and then that's really all we have to worry about in terms of precipitation for the next little while, because after that, we do start to clear up at least a little bit, besides the fact that tomorrow morning, there is a possibility in the afternoon and into the evening of some pretty significant snowfall around Nanaimo. Now, the vast majority of models not showing any snow around Nanaimo tomorrow at all, but a couple of them showing a very serious dump. So Environment Canada has issued a special weather statement just in case that does come tomorrow for the sort of Nanaimo area and up the Malahat Highway. So be aware that it's a possibility, but very much up in the air at this point. Now here we're looking at system as it does continue to, the models continue to say it's going to split, and then that snow not coming to us until early next week, whereas Washington and Oregon do get quite a dump. And then in terms of the temperatures across the province, we do watch those continue to plummet as we get that Arctic air mass really come down. Like I said, wind chill value is going to be very low, and across the coast, even very cold conditions. Tomorrow, most of the activity happening in the south in terms of precipitation, but even there, we're not looking at too much. And here in Vancouver, not much flurries possible tomorrow. And then Environment Canada calling for snow in the overnight, but very much up in the air, I'd say. And then we do start to clear up as those temperatures do drop.
Okay. Thanks very much, Darius.
Thanks, Dan.
Some athletes have their superstitions. Tapping the goalpost, a special energy drink before the game, not shaving. But for one player, it's all about the mustard. His story's next.
Dress up like play pretend, knee deep in the world's quicksand, the water's wide. Come on, jump in. Sitting here on the couch, I pray somebody else here owns my brain. What is this place inside? I guess I'll stay. No.
Hey, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
CBC Vancouver is proud to launch Vibin, hosted by award-winning journalist Rohith Joseph. Discover fresh sounds from BC and beyond with this province-wide music program. Vibin airs every Saturday at 4 p.m. starting January 13th. And never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter and keep connected with us.
Pickle juice and mustard, two salty condiments you might not associate with hockey.
But that's not the case for some former players with the OHL's Windsor Spitfires. Jason Vio explains why they say their odd game time tradition allows them to hit peak performance.
I think any normal fan or person would just kind of be like, this guy's crazy, just putting mustard in his mouth.
For defenseman Roberto Mancini, his passion for mustard started 4 years ago while playing in the Ontario Hockey League. At first, he was discreet about it, just using the packets you'd find at the arena concession stand. Now, the self-proclaimed mustard guy has no shame in getting it right from the big bottle in full view of fans.
It looks kind of like you're enjoying it a bit. Yeah, I actually wasn't the biggest mustard fan, and then I kind of started falling in love with it a couple years ago, and now I just kind of went with it.
It's even become a superstition, and you'll notice Mancini taking a swig of mustard at specific times during the game.
No, it's definitely not the best tasting thing ever, but you kind of get used to it. I just find it helps my legs. My legs will feel a little bit heavy after the first period, just kind of getting into the game, and I'll kind of just relieve all the tension and the heaviness.
And if you pay close attention to the bench, you may also notice a jar of pickles sitting around. Forward Oliver Pierce says the salty and vinegary condiment is the only thing that relieves his muscle cramps.
I was willing to try anything. I mean, I drank in soy sauce, mustard, pickle juice now. The soy sauce didn't sit well in my stomach. Had some problems late night.
It works so well, he goes through 2 jars of Bick's tangy dill-sliced pickles per game. He sips every last drop, but the pickles are now a team tradition.
I go around the room handing out pickles. Guys ask me for pickles and give them a couple pickles. So, it's something for me and the team. So.
As for why these strange habits relieve muscle cramps, it's a bit of a mystery for the team's physiotherapist.
A couple theories are it's the high sodium content in the pickle juice. Electrolytes, all that being kind of replenished in the muscles, which kind of staves off the cramping.
The mustard pickle bromance was thought to be over after Mancini was traded to the Flint Firebirds on Monday. However, Tuesday morning, Pierre has also been swapped to the same team, reuniting the two players with quirky habits. Jason Vio, CBC News, Windsor.
Favorite mustard?
Never been asked that before.
There you go. First time for everything.
Dijon.
You gotta have Dijon.
You?
I'm the same. Oh yeah. Gotta be Dijon, Jerry.
Very nice.
Okay, a Las Vegas landmark has transformed into one of the world's most recognizable video games, Tetris. Now, that fueled a lot of car rides. The transformation of the Las Vegas Sphere comes on the 40th anniversary of Tetris and this week's annual Consumer Electronics Show.
It's also thought to be a nod to the 13-year-old boy in Oklahoma. He recently became the first player to officially beat the original Nintendo version of Tetris when the game froze because of his rapid-fire play.
He was just too good.
He was too good.
Did you play Tetris when you were younger?
Oh, I'm so bad. I'm
Are
so
you?
bad. But I watched him do it. It was incredible.
Was it good?
It was amazing.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's fun.
It's so fun. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
We'll have your next local news at 11 o'clock right after the National. We'll see you then.
See you then.